Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name's Holly and today I wanted to do a little video on the backpacker murders of Ivan Milat. He is one of Australia's worst serial killers and I find him really interesting because of just how cold and calculated his killings were. The other reason I wanted to do him is because he recently, last month, he actually died, and it just when seeing it on the news and stuff just reminded me of him, and yeah, it made me want to do a video on him. I hope you enjoy. These murders took place between 1989 and 1993 in the Belangolo State Forest and took a total of 7 lives, with the possibility of more we are still unaware of. There were many other backpackers that went missing around the same area and around the same time, but the bodies have just never been found. So I guess we'll never really know how many lives Milat actually took. To give a bit of background on Ivan Milat, he was one of, I think it was 14 children born to Stephen and Margaret Milat in 1944 on the 27th of December. Now, from a young age, the Milat boys were always causing mischief. Maybe the girls too, but I think out of the 14 children, 10 of them were boys. A lot of them had petty theft charges against them, and some of them were in and out of jail. Police were always being called to their farm. The family actually was quite a closed family though. The boys didn't really have many friends. From what I could gather, there was quite a bit of abuse that went on in that family household. The dad, Stephen Milat, was an alcoholic, and that's not to say all alcoholics are abusive at all. I just believe he was. And also, I mean, if you look at Milat and his behaviours, it's hard to believe that someone like that, with all serial killers, it's hard to believe people like that come from loving, wholesome family upbringings. By the age of 17, Milat had to go before Liverpool Children's Court on charges of stealing from a dwelling. But as this was his first known offence, he was put on a good behaviour bond, though this didn't last long, as 2 months later he was charged on breaking and entering in a garage. Because of this, Milat was sent to Mount Peleng Juvenile Institution for I think about 6 months of just hard labour. Basically, from this time in 1962 to 1974, Milat was in and out of prison or running from police. He even faked his own suicide and went to New Zealand for a year, which I think is crazy. At this time, before Milat had even turned 30, it's interesting to note he was actually accused of kidnapping and raping 2 18-year-old female hitchhikers. These 2 ladies actually got away though, and they called the police, they made statements, they went to court, but Milat got away with it on bail because there just wasn't enough evidence. Especially back then, she was like, Milat raped me, but because the court said because there wasn't enough evidence and Milat was saying it was consensual sex, they couldn't charge him. I can't even imagine how traumatizing that would be though, to have to go to the police after being kidnapped and raped and make a statement, and then go to court and face the rapist and make, you know, another statement or your testimony, and then see him walk free, just see him walk out the door. That would be awful, so traumatic. I don't know how they would have survived that. I actually tried to look the 2 ladies up to see if they had done any interviews or where they were now, and there's nothing. I have no idea if they changed their identities or if they're even still alive, so who knows. During these years as well, Milat actually worked for the RTA, which is the Roads and Traffic Authority, and basically what he did is he would work on construction and conservation of roads around New South Wales, and this is an important note to remember. And he actually worked here for probably about 10 years before 1974 and for years to come until he was eventually put in prison. Ivan Milat grew up in Moorebank with his family. It's a suburb on the outskirts of Sydney. I'll see if I can include a photo of it, and also like a photo of Moorebank and then how far it is from the Belangolo State Forest. I'll see how good I am at editing. After this accused rape and kidnapping trial, Milat seemed to lay low for a couple years. He even married a 16-year-old in 1983 when he was 39, can I add? I don't know about you, I find that really weird. But basically they got divorced in 1989 because she accused him of domestic violence, and I'm sure there were other things going on too. But it's interesting when you look at the year they divorced and the year he started his murders, because it's the same year. And I wonder why she divorced him. I wonder if she knew, if she was suspicious of him, or what. I guess we'll never know. So because I haven't done this before, I didn't really know whether to talk about the victims of Ivan Milat in the order of him killing them or in the order of them being found, but I think it will make more sense for me to talk about them in the order that they're found. So just note that this isn't the order that he killed them necessarily. The first of Ivan Milat's victims were found on the 19th of September 1992. These were the bodies of Joanne Walters and Caroline Clark, and they were found by, I believe it was two runners running through Belangolo State Forest, just on a casual run. The forest, although it is known for the Ivan Milat murders, I believe it's quite a beautiful piece of nature, and a lot of people go there just to walk through it. Caroline Clark was 21 and Joanne Walters was just 22. These two girls were backpackers from Britain who had decided to go south of Sydney after working in Sydney for a while. I think Joanne was a nanny who worked in Willoughby, I believe, and Caroline had been working in a t-shirt factory. Caroline was found with 10 bullet wounds to her head. She was found with stab wounds to her spine, and it's believed that Ivan used her as target practice. Joanne was found with 14 stab wounds, 4 to the chest, 1 to the neck, and 9 to the back, again along the spine. Ivan made those stab wounds along the spine because it would paralyze his victims without instantly killing them. Milat would have done this to prolong her dying, which would have meant that she could have seen him acting out his crimes for longer, which is what psychopaths want. They want to see people suffering, and that's exactly what he was doing. Joanne was also found with her jeans zip undone, but the top button done up as if they'd been hastily done back up on her. Police think that the reason for this is because she was sexually assaulted in some way, but because her body was so decomposed when they found her, they can't be sure. Police found cigarette butts, a .22 caliber, cartridge cases, and like a man-made primitive fireplace near this scene, implying that the killer had stayed for a while. It just shows how much of a psychopath he truly was, and I think that's why I find this case so interesting, because people like that aren't normal, and I don't understand how you can have that way of thinking. Like I could never fathom doing anything that Ivan did, let alone then staying at the crime scene. Despite the amount of forensic evidence that was at the crime scene, police struggled to make any progress in the case. They actually did an extensive search of the area after the bodies were found in case there were any other bodies, but they found none, and they believed that whoever had done this murder had acted just on this murder alone. Fast forward to October 1993, so almost a year later, a gentleman called Bruce Pryor was driving around in the Belangolo State Forest. Some sources said he was collecting firewood, and other sources said he was actually looking for more bodies. I'm not sure which one's true. I think I'm leaning towards he was looking for more bodies. But yeah, again, I'm not sure. And I know that sounds sort of suspicious that someone would be looking for bodies, but I kind of get it. If you're someone like me who's very interested in crime and crime scenes and how these things happen, I don't really blame him for going to look. I read somewhere that he had gone a couple of times in the previous 9 months to look for human remains, but again, I'm not sure if that's true. Either way, Pryor did come along moraines. Why do I keep saying moraine? He found the bodies of James Gibson, who was 19 at the time, and Deborah Everest, who was 19 as well. This couple had been missing since December of 1989. I believe they were an Australian couple, and they'd been travelling up the coast from Melbourne to go to a music festival. But yeah, they never got there and they were never seen again. They'd both finished school the year before. James had finished school and deferred his degree of arts for a year to travel, and he'd actually done a lot of hitchhiking before he was taken by Milat. Deborah, on the other hand, was at uni doing a degree in arts and psychology, and she had hoped this would lead her into a career of journalism. Both of them had met at a concert not that long before they'd gone travelling together. Of course, Pryor was a suspect in this, seeing as he was the one that found the bodies, but he was ruled out pretty quickly, I believe, by police. James, like Joanne and Caroline, had those same spine stab wounds that would have led to paralysis. He also had stab wounds on his back and chest, which would have punctured his heart and lungs. Again, James was found with his pants zipper undone, but the top button done up, which implies again that there was a sexual element to the crime. Deborah, on the other hand, unlike the other three, had been badly beaten. She had her skull fractured in 2 places, she had a broken jaw, and she had stab wounds on her forehead. Again, like last time, when police conducted a search, they found a man-made fireplace nearby the scene, again implying that the killer had been there for a while. And this was the main piece of evidence, along with how the bodies were murdered. That was the main piece of evidence that sort of made police believe that they were dealing with a serial killer. This time, police conducted a more in-depth search, and just a week later, on November 1st, they found the body of 21-year-old German Simone Schmeidel. Simone Schmeidel had come to Australia by herself. She was a solo traveller. I believe she was visiting some friends in Australia that she had previously met in Alaska. On the day of her disappearance, she had actually been staying at a friend's parents' house who lived just 1.5 kilometres from where the Milats lived at that point in time, I think in Moorebank. She was planning on taking a train to Liverpool to continue travelling that day, but as there were track work, she had decided to hitchhike instead. The 20th of January 1990 would be the last day that anyone saw Simone Schmeidel alive. Fast forward to November of 1993, she was found with her shirt and bra pushed up and her green shorts hanging on her pelvis with the ties undone. She had 8 stab wounds, again, like the other bodies. This seemed to be a pattern of Milats. Nearby to this scene, police found some clothing, but the clothing didn't belong to Simone. The clothes actually belonged to 20-year-old Anya Hubscheid, who would be found 3 days later in a shallow grave 50 meters from her also missing boyfriend, 21-year-old Gabor Neugbauer, I think. Again, I'm really sorry if I butchered that last name. I'm not good at German, and these last 3 victims were German. This would bring the body count in the Belangolo State Forest up to a total of 7. Gabor had been found with multiple stab wounds to the back. His pants were partially unzipped, again with the fly undone, and it appeared he had been strangled. Anya, on the other hand, had been decapitated, and to this day her head has never been found. It was at this point that New South Wales police knew they had a serial killer on their hands, and they knew they had to find him fast. Before this, it was super popular for travellers to hitchhike. It was a lot cheaper than catching trains and also easier, and you could meet real Australians doing it this way. But yeah, the government started to seriously discourage hitchhiking, especially for people that were foreign. Police still had no idea who did this, though they looked into RTA vehicle memberships, they looked into gun licenses, they looked into gym memberships, and slowly their list of suspects got smaller. They knew that it was probably a male who had committed these crimes around the age of his 30s or his 40s. They knew he probably had a 4-wheel drive, and they knew he would have known the area well. It wasn't until the 13th of November 1993 that police had the big break they'd been waiting for. It came in the form of 24-year-old British Paul Onions, who stated he had been hitchhiking from Liverpool to Mildura on the 25th of January 1990, when a man in a 4-wheel drive who called himself Bill had pulled up, asking if he wanted a lift. Paul said he started becoming suspicious of this man because he started asking personal questions. He said he was on edge as Bill unexpectedly pulled over, saying he needed to get something out of the boot. Bill comes back around the side of the car with a revolver, which is a gun, and some ropes, stating that Paul is being robbed. Thankfully, Paul jumps out of the car on the highway and starts running. This man called Bill is shooting at Paul as he's running, but Paul manages to flag down a motorist who he explains to what is happening and who takes him to Bowral Police Station, where he made a formal statement on 25th of January 1990. The phone call Paul had made to the police in 1993 had been to remind police of this event that had happened. Police still had this event in their notes, but without Paul calling, they were unable to make the connection. They had so many leads coming in because it was such a well-known, wide case. With cases like this, a lot of people will call in leads. A lot of people will call in things that just have nothing to do with the case. But police have to look into every single one of these leads legally in case they are true and they were to miss something. Police were able to actually corroborate Paul's story because 2 other people had called in talking about a friend of theirs who had said that he had kidnapped someone on the road near Belangolo State Forest, but that person had got away. These 2 people that had called in said that the person who had been telling this story was Ivan Milat. One of the people calling in was the girlfriend of someone who worked with Milat, and I think the other person was a family member of Milat's, like a wife of someone or something. I can't actually remember. In February of 1994, police started surveillancing Milat's house in Eagle Vale. They found that he had recently sold his 4-wheel drive, and as well as this, he happened to have every day off work that were the days that these people had gone missing. The police knew that Milat, along with a lot of his family members, were obsessed with guns, and I'm going to include some pictures if I can. On the 22nd of May, Milat's house, along with a couple of his family members' houses, were raided by police. I think there were over 300 police that raided the multiple houses. Police found guns that matched the type that was used in the murders. It was a modified gun, and they knew that because was some sort of mark they found on the bullet shells implied that the guns had been had homemade modifications to them. They uncovered foreign currency, a tent, other camping material, such as sleeping bags and cameras belonging to his victims. In the house of his mother and some of his brothers, whose houses were also raided, police found over 24 weapons, 250 kilos of ammunition, and several more items belonging to the victims, including one of their backpacks. Because of these raids, two of Ivan's brothers, Richard and Walter, were tried in relation to weapons, drugs, and stolen property found on their property. On 26th of March 1996, Milat's trial opened in the New South Wales Supreme Court. Milat's defence argued that despite the evidence, there was no circumstantial evidence proving Milat had been there at the time of the murders. I think they argued the police put the evidence in Milat's house, and they can do this because they're basically saying, well, yeah, sure, there was stuff in my house, but anyone could have put that there. You can't prove that I was at the crime scene at the time when the crimes happened. But for obvious reasons, this argument didn't really work. And when Milat knew this was happening, he started to shift the blame to his brothers, which I don't know how you could forgive your brother for saying that you were a murderer instead of him to save his own ass, but apparently he did. But in July of 1996, after 18 weeks of testimony, the jury found Milat guilty of 7 counts of murder. He was given a life sentence on each count, without the possibility of parole. He was also convicted of attempted murder, false imprisonment, and robbery of Paul Onions, for which he received 6 years jail time each, so 3 times 6, so 18 years for what he did to Paul Onion. Milat appealed multiple times to reduce his sentence, but none of them worked. I was reading that one of the times quite recently, he literally cut off his pinky finger with a plastic knife to mail to the Supreme Court in order to get his case appealed. This didn't work. I think he got found before he mailed it. So yeah, the Supreme Court didn't even get to see the finger, and all Milat had to show for this was 1 less finger. Milat actually died last month of stomach cancer, and he had never admitted guilt to his crimes. His whole family still believes or still claims that he's innocent, besides one of his brothers, Boris, who's actually done multiple interviews talking about Milat and what he was really like. It's interesting to note also that one of Milat's, I think, great nephews also murdered someone in the Belangolo State Forest. He murdered one of his best friends with 2 other guys on his best friend's 17th birthday. Obviously, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. That brings me to the end of this video though. Thank you so much for watching. If you did, I'm sorry if it was all over the place. Please comment below if there's anything you think I could do to make these videos better, because I want to make more crime videos. I found it really fun researching and yeah, getting all the information together, and I actually have another case that I've already started researching that I want to make a video on too. But either way, thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll see you soon.